This is Public Broadcasting. I'm your host, Captain Rutlidge. Over 100 years ago, Canadian author Lucy Maud Montgomery published a novel based loosely off her childhood on Prince Edward Island. Ever since, readers around the world grew to love the small community of Avonlea and the little orphan girl who made it her home, Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of Green Gables tells the story of Anne Shirley, who gets taken in by bachelor farmer Matthew Cuthbert and his sister Marilla. Anne gets into all sorts of mischief with her vivid imagination, but soon learns and matures, attending Avonlea School alongside her friend Diana Barry and her rival Gilbert Blythe. She attends Queen's College in Charlottetown, and she becomes a school teacher. Since its publishing in 1908, Anne of Green Gables has sold 50 million copies worldwide and is currently on the school reading list for both Canada and Japan.
In 1984, Canadian filmmaker Kevin Sullivan bought the rights to Anne of Green Gables and wrote up a 4-hour miniseries based off the novel for Canadian television. In 1985, that miniseries was released on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation and eventually PBS.
The 1985 miniseries stars Megan Follows as Anne Shirley, Colleen Dewhurst as Marilla, and Richard Farnsworth as Matthew. It eventually became one of the highest-rated drama series on PBS and spawned a number of sequels that were also directed, written, and produced by Kevin Sullivan.
Well, some liberties must be taken when adapting novels to the screen, and Sullivan's Anne series was no stranger to changes. The first two miniseries were more or less firmly ingrained in the Montgomery stories. The final two, well...
Lucy Maud Montgomery never gave a definitive timeline for the Anne stories, but based on the fact that Anne's children served in the First World War and other hints in the series, place her birth somewhere around 1865. Sullivan's stories, for dramatic story purposes, moved Anne's birth ahead to 1885. In the first two miniseries, these changes aren't terribly noticeable, but for the third miniseries, set during World War I, these differences really stand out. So much so that many fans absolutely loathe the later miniseries for stepping so far away from the original source material.
Nevertheless, Kevin Sullivan saw great success with his Anne adaptations, so much so that he decided to produce a few spin-offs. Road to Avonlea was made for Disney Channel, but for PBS Kids, Sullivan made an animated series, Anne of Green Gables, the animated series.
Set during Anne's adolescent years, the series involves Anne, her friends, and the Cuthberts getting into problems around Avonlea and finding ways to fix said problems. The show aired on PBS Kids from 2001 to 2002 and featured Bryn McCauley as the voice of Anne. Kevin Sullivan set up Animation Productions to handle the animation for the series, and there were also classroom ready-to-learn guides for teachers tied to the series.
There's not a whole lot that I can say about this series other than... To illustrate my point, here's the animation for the show intro.
I can imagine a world full of joy. Just give me your hand and I'll teach you to hope. You'll find that I've something worthwhile.
You see, it's not too bad. In fact, it's pretty well done. Now, here's a glimpse of the animation in the show proper.
Aha! One victim. Right on schedule.
Yeah, there are a few issues. For one thing, the character animation is obviously computerized. That's not terrible, but when it's mixed with the intricately designed backgrounds, it stands out like a sore thumb.
That's not to say that this series is terrible as a whole, though. For one thing, the characters keep true to their original source. Anne is imaginative and occasionally absent-minded. Diana is Anne's grounded other half. Gilbert Blythe is cocky and self-sure. Marilla is uptight but still loving, etc., etc. What's more, the writing is pretty well done for a children's animated series of this type.
They even managed to incorporate more facets of the Montgomery novels. For example, Anne in the novel has an imaginary friend in her mirror. Now, she talks into the mirror for advice. Novel Anne imagined all sorts of magical creatures in the forests around Avonlea. Animated Anne takes advice from these magical creatures.
In addition to the Montgomery facets, Kevin Sullivan included bits of his own Avonlea canon, such as Felicity and Felix King attending school alongside Anne, although in Roads to Avonlea, Anne has already graduated Avonlea School, but I digress. What's more, Sullivan added a new school teacher for the Avonlea children. In the books, Mr. Phillips and Miss Stacy taught the school. The animated series has an elderly teacher named Miss King in charge of the Avonlea School.
After production wrapped on the animated series and the final Anne miniseries in 2009, Kevin Sullivan pretty much retired from his production company. Then, in 2016, 30 years after the Sullivan Anne of Green Gables premiered on television, Canadian television station YTV released a new adaptation of Montgomery's work. On Thanksgiving that year, it premiered on PBS.
The 2016 Anne of Green Gables stars Ella Ballantyne as Anne Shirley, Sarah Botsford as Marilla Cuthbert, and Martin Sheen as Matthew Cuthbert, with John Kent Harrison directing. The film premiered on PBS on Thanksgiving of 2016, followed by 2 sequel films in 2017 and 2018. All 3 films cover the entirety of Anne of Green Gables. The first film covers Anne's arrival, the second her growth and relationships in Avonlea, and the third her young adulthood and teaching career.
For the most part, these movies are pretty well done. Sure, they're not on the same caliber as the Sullivan miniseries, but they still keep close to the Montgomery novel with few liberties taken for story purposes. However, there are a few acting choices that probably don't work too well.
In the original novel, the Cuthberts were described as 2 middle-aged siblings. Marilla is slender, plain, and tall. Arguably, Sarah Botsford fits that description fairly well. On the other hand, Matthew is described fairly differently, as a man that young girls often laugh at behind his back. You can argue that Richard Farnsworth kind of fits into this dye, but it's blatantly clear that Martin Sheen was far too refined in looks to be like Matthew Cuthbert. What's more, his personality alters slightly too. Book Matthew is quiet and stoical. Martin Sheen's Matthew gets as much dialogue as Anne on some occasions. Then again, in past adaptations, and even in the novel, Matthew never got much dialogue or characterization. At least in this adaptation, Matthew is given more of a chance to leave an impact as one of Anne's father figures.
Ella Ballantyne does a fair job as Anne, though. She can talk the ears off cornstalk, but also has moments of silence, such as when she sinks in the beauty of Avonlea. But there are some acting choices that don't suit the story well for her. Take, for example, this scene where Rachel Lynn pokes fun at Anne's appearance when she first sees her. Now, here's a scene from the Sullivan miniseries.
Lawful heart, her hair's as red as carrots.
Dare you say I'm skinny and carrots? You're a rude, impolite, unfeeling woman, and I hate you!
And Shirley.
You can see the anger build up in Anne's face, and you really believe she hates Rachel for saying such nasty things about her. Now, here's the 2016 scene.
My word. Would you look at those freckles?
My dear, what an odd look. What could it mean?
It means I hate you.
I beg your pardon.
Anne! Anne!
You can see the difference. For this one, Anne just shrugs off Rachel with a snarky bit of backtalk. There's not as much emotional turmoil as in the novel, or in the Sullivan miniseries, for that matter.
Despite its imperfections, the 2016 film and its follow-ups are worthy adaptations to stand in the ranks of all the other adaptations of Anne of Green Gables.
So, those are the 3 adaptations of Anne of Green Gables that have been on PBS. So, which of these 3 adaptations do you guys enjoy the most? Well, feel free to vote in the video poll, and I'll tabulate the results. But in the meantime, it's time for the PBS Station Spotlight. So we've been going all over the country with these PBS stations, and it's now time to draw a new one out of the pretty straw hat. Let's see what we get. take this one here. We're going down to sunny California with KLCS Los Angeles.
KLCS was founded by the Los Angeles Unified School District, who started broadcasting on Channel 58 in 1973. The station currently serves as one of 3 PBS member stations in the Los Angeles area, but unlike most public television stations in America, it does not rely on pledge drives for fundraising, instead giving donor options on its website. Station programming mainly includes national PBS programming, along with the news talk program Families Matter. If you're in the Los Angeles area, you can tune in to KLCS on Channel 58, with PBS Kids on the .2 channel and Create on the .3 channel.
Thank you folks very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, feel free to like, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment below, follow on Twitter, and of course, don't forget to support your local PBS stations. So more programming related to this one can find its way to your PBS screens. So in the meantime, I'm Captain Rutlidge. Good day.
See you next time for even more fun.